and we're going to talk about the topic of the show now. The way we have this written in terms of its headline is, do AA games only have a space to release on Game Pass? It's an interesting topic, and it sort of speaks to how disruptive I think the subscription model has been to the games industry in the last few years. That kind of, I think most people in the industry say it's been quite positive, but it has led to some changes and is leading to some long-term changes that are happening along the way. So it's a bit nebulous. Because of that, we've got a few subheadings here. The first one is, what even is AA? And what does AA mean after the rise of the indies? It's
weird, right?
It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, it's weird, I think, for two reasons. One, because, like you said, that like Game Pass has come in and sort of just like, really, really changed the way games are both being sold, like in terms of like the literal way someone who is releasing a game will try and market it to someone who is going to buy a game. But also like the availability of it is just so extreme that, from what we've seen, like I haven't heard anything otherwise really. And like, I'm waiting to hear it because there's no reason for this not to come out, but I'm waiting to hear someone say like, yeah, I lost money by releasing on Game Pass. But
the only way we've really heard that is I lost money by releasing on PlayStation Plus. And even then, we only really heard it once.
I don't even remember what that was. What?
So that was Lorne Lanning coming out to talk about Oddworld, how because they did a deal for X amount, but because the PS5 had such high demand after it came out and had so many downloads, they actually got a pretty small amount in comparison to what they, into how much traffic they did. And they were like, oh, we probably actually lost money on this.
And look, Lorne, I don't know many people that were really interested in Oddworld to begin with, to be quite frank with you. So we don't know. Look, he probably knows. He definitely knows more than me, but also I don't know if like that was maybe like an excuse to sort of get people to be a bit more on his side. But like, I don't know, that Oddworld game wasn't very good.
Did you play it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so and so we've not heard a negative, like I have not heard of an overwhelmingly negative story coming out of Game Pass in terms of launching on Game Pass at the same time as launching elsewhere, which leads me to believe that launching on Game Pass, the deal that you do with Microsoft to launch on it is favorable for you. Which means that there is suddenly a different market has appeared, right? Mm-hmm. This market has really, we think, helped the AA space find a place to sell, because trying to not be a big studio where you can do a gigantic marketing push with 100 million influencers and being on stage at E3 and getting your ad on the TV screens at your local EB games or whatever.
Right, like at the Super Bowl, like a Call of Duty.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely, right. Like it's hard to get your game out there sometimes, even if you're like larger than like just an indie game. So Game Pass, being you don't have to pay any extra money to just play this right now, is a really good thing to want to market towards. Who are those people that are doing that, right? Who is the AA space? This is what we're gonna define it.
Yeah, totally. It's funny. Sam is asked in the chat, was AA a term used prior to indie? And I think yes, that is the case. Like the term like AA and AAA games is it's quite a dated terminology, I want to say. Like it's from like pre-internet era games.
AA, was it?
Industry. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like I'm not sure.
Because I remember hearing about the AA games and how all of the AA game studios fell away during the global financial crisis because all of a sudden people weren't just buying random shit anymore. They couldn't afford to. The developers couldn't afford to make just random shit, and so all of the shovelware on the Wii, all of those companies, they all went under, and stuff like a lot of the things that THQ were bringing out, they folded quite
dramatically.
They're one of the larger publishers. Yeah, quite dramatically, and we've been watching their shambling corpse sort of reanimate itself for the last 5 years. Since someone else rebought the name and all of the properties.
Yeah, or more like that. Someone else has been Weekend at Bernie's the corpse of THQ Nordic.
Yeah,
or THQ rather.
So yeah, that's what I know. That's my earliest recognition of what a AA game is how they all fell away during that time. And it was not long after that time, it was during the aftermath of the GFC, that we started to see the rise of indie games, where people could just, we had online infrastructure become a much bigger deal as part of the Wii and 360 and PS3 console generations. Steam became much more valuable and valid of a ecosystem that people could use, even if you weren't a game made by Valve Software.
Yeah.
And yeah, all of a sudden the barrier to entry became much lower for just anyone to put their game out there. So now we start to look at weird things, right? Because we've got all these indie developers, right? They may be working with a publisher, but sometimes they're working out of their own house, or they own like a studio room in like a shared office space similar to the arcade in Melbourne.
Rest in peace.
Those. Pardon?
Rest in peace.
Yes, rest in peace. There's no replacement for it yet?
No. There won't be for quite a while, I believe. That's my understanding.
That is very sad.
Mm.
So yeah, the line starts to get blurred because all of a sudden you have these very, very what's the word I'm trying to use? You have these very successful independent developers going to established publishers like Devolver Digital, or sometimes even EA and Ubisoft, you saw with their originals. And all of a sudden you're looking at something like a AAA publisher working with an indie developer. So it's not a huge team, but it's got money behind it and resources and know-how. So does that make it AA, or is it like just sponsored indie, or like,
yeah,
or is it like mini AAA? It's like lowercase A's as opposed to uppercase A's. Like
you know that vine of the dude at the battery, like on the battery shelf in the supermarket, and he's like, and he like as he gets to like the AAA batteries and the quadruple A batteries.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, so it is hard to draw that line, and I think that, look, there's a lot of terrible terms in the games industry in terms of like, this doesn't really mean anything. I think that the genres in games is already fucked, but like in terms of just that describing the genre of a game, maybe describing a mechanic is a terrible way to describe a game. And this classifier also is getting worse and worse as the term triple I exists and the term quadruple A also exists. These are both two dog shit terms, and anybody that uses them unironically or without any hint of this is dumb is very, very silly and very marketing.
Yeah. I'm firmly of the opinion that that games actually don't exist in, like, if anyone has called themselves anything like that, that game actually doesn't exist. Like, we've never actually seen a quadruple A game. We've just seen a lot of announcements of new studios starting to develop quadruple A games. It's like, all right, good luck to you.
Skull and Bones is the first. And if that ain't a red flag...
Is it actually?
Yeah, yep. Ubisoft calling that a quadruple A game.
Is Skull and Bones a quadruple A game? Senior producer Francois Logier also describes his game as quadruple A. Skull and Bones is a quadruple A game.
I am in a Discord with someone who apparently played that game and did not have a very good time.
Oh no.
As a part of a NDA'd test that they were a part of, which they broke.
That they then DA'd.
Yeah, which they then definitely DA'd in what is actually a fairly public Discord. This is the Wikipedia fucking description of what is AA. And there's a lot of asterisks next to this, because there's a lot of like, who decided this? I don't know. Someone did. Someone over someone over at VentureBeat decided one of these, and someone over at another. What was this? This was like another, just like a paper. Decided another quantifier for AA. So I'm just going to read through it. AA games are mid-market video games that typically have some... God, I'm having so much trouble reading today. AA games are mid-market video games that typically have some type of professional development, though typical outside of the large first-party studios of the major developers. These may be from larger teams of indie developers in addition to larger non-indie studios. AA studios tend to range from 50 to 100 people in size. I don't know who decided that, but that's what Wikipedia says. A AA development studio will typically be backed by a publisher, but not fundamentally part of that publisher, and thus have somewhat more freedom to innovate and experiment compared to AAA studios, though will still be constrained by specific risk-limiting targets and goals from their funding source.
Yeah, I think that part of that description is one of the most incisive parts of it. That like is the most clear. The like, a studio that is backed by a publisher, that is what we would describe as a AA studio. That makes sense. And of a certain size, 50 to 100. Like larger than a startup, smaller than your big budget AAA studios. That makes sense. That seems quite quantifiable. That's a good way to define a studio.
Yeah. Which is interesting because, so one of the examples in this Wikipedia page, which is now a little bit outdated, was Obsidian. And when I think back to the games Obsidian have made recently, even all the way back to Fallout New Vegas, it hits all those marks. It is a team of 50 to 100 people. They had the freedom to innovate and experiment compared to some AAA studios, though will still be constrained by specific risk-limiting targets and goals from their funding source, which is precisely what happened there.
They had to make a Fallout game. They couldn't make whatever they wanted.
Yep.
And they had the benefit of using the Fallout engine.
And there's that story which has been construed a little bit online. It's not 100% true, but like there was that story going around about them, like specific Metacritic scores, depending on what they hit, determine like the bonus that Bethesda were going to give Obsidian. That story is a little bit more embellished than what is apparently public, but like there was a thing for a long time where like, oh my god, like Bethesda didn't give the bonus to Obsidian for New Vegas because they were like half a point below one of their mark, and it's not quite that cut and dry, but it's a good indicator of the kind of relationship a publisher might have with a AA studio. Mm-hmm. To which I ask you, the moment they are bought by Microsoft, are they no longer a AA studio?
I would say yes.
Yeah?
I would say yes, because for all intents and purposes, right? We were saying this in the lead up to this as well. We were saying like the indie AA, AAA sort of rankings is something that can be applied to games, something that can be applied to studios, and something that can be applied to publishers. And I think it means something different when you apply it to each of those different contexts.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden it's like, a studio that is independent, tied to a publisher or working on a publisher's IP. Right, so Bluepoint Games until they were acquired, or Housemarque Games until they were acquired, or Obsidian Games, like you said, until they were acquired. Because now, who knows? There's far less transparency about how those studios are run now that they're first-party studios. They have the backing and funding of their new parents, their new parent companies. So who knows whether that means upsizing, whether that means, they get to use new tech, they get to borrow tech from other studios. Like, all of a sudden they're a part of this network. Like, it immediately becomes this sort of, I would say as soon as you become a first party studio of a large publisher and system owner like that, no, you can't be called AA anymore. You may release games of a AA scope, but in terms of your development size and the developer teams, I would say you can't define them as AA anymore. They're not funded in a way that is like that.
Yeah. Which is interesting because my immediate thought then went to Bithell and
Mike Bithell.
Yeah, and his studio, which is definitely less than 50 people. I think it's pretty safe to assume.
I think so, yeah. But it's probably 1 to 2 dozen.
Yeah, no, I'm sure there's a group of people, I'm assuming, that are working there.
I also think of someone like Supergiant behind Hades and Pyre. Like they're a large indie team, but I don't think they have more than 50 people.
I don't know. I reckon I could see them having about 60 people. Number of employees as of 2018 is apparently 20. So yeah, maybe not. It's such a weird way to describe something, right? Because then it's like, okay, so this space that these people can. One of the things that this definition brings up is risk limiting targets and goals from their funding source, which we spoke about before. There is perhaps more room for that to breathe, I guess, when you launch on a thing like Game Pass, right? Because you have there seems to be a lot more freedom in terms of the financial return you will probably get when you launch day one on Game Pass when you're a game of this size, from what we've heard.
That's the thing, right? There are so many people who have said to themselves, Xbox first-party games launch day and date on Game Pass. That makes it worth it for me to have for the year and not even worry about it. And I can use whatever else is there in the meantime. So they have it, right? They've spent the money, they're invested already.
Yep.
Which means that the money hurdle is gone. Yep. It's evaporated. It doesn't exist for any other games that go forward. The only hurdle you've got now is time and like hard drive space. Like that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are very small hurdles in comparison to the financial hurdle of like, oh, this game looks cool. Like, I don't know if I'd pay $30 to pay Citizen Sleeper. Oh, it's on Game Pass. Oh, well, I'll give it a go. That sounds like a cool vibe. Hey, I love this game. Like that's the flow-on effect you get there.
And I guess it sort of allows you to then try games you have even heard are bad that are on there because they are there. You could release a game that is not very good, hypothetically, and you will still get perhaps more people playing it. Well, okay, no, definitely you'll get more people playing it as if you just released it on a store.
Yeah. I could play Balan Wonderworld on PS5 whenever I want now.
Is that on Thingo?
Yeah, it is on Thingo. I saw it the other night.
I still haven't picked up my copy.
You own that game.
I haven't picked it up.
Oh, yeah, you click and collect.
Yeah, click. I didn't want to pay for postage. Still sitting at an EB game somewhere in Melbourne.
That's so funny.
So the AA games that come out, these medium scope, medium sized team games, the ones that don't release on Game Pass, do we think that they are limiting themselves by not releasing on Game Pass?
I think it's really, really tricky.
Yeah.
I think one of the best examples of a AA game. Were you saying AAA just then?
No, AA.
Okay. If
I did say AAA, I did definitely mean AA.
Right. One of the most recent examples of AA that I could think of, especially in regards to the definitions we just gave it, is It Takes Two. What do you do?
Whacked my middle finger on the mic stand on like a really hard metal bit.
How hard?
Like really hard. Like I whacked it hard enough because I didn't know the mic stand was there.
Right. Yep. Fair enough.
Ow.
You swung through like a tennis, like you would with a tennis ball on a tennis court with a tennis racket
Yeah.
at your desk.
Yes, at my desk. It takes two.
It Takes Two, I say, fits that definition that we sort of came to just then. But the thing with It Takes Two is that it's still backed by EA. It still had EA's
Marketing wallet.
marketing, funding and expertise behind it. I think what really helped It Takes Two was it was a really original idea, and they're doing something pretty unique at Hazelight with their last few games. Brothers and A Way Out and It Takes Two have all played with, co-op games, designed co-op games, or controlling two characters at once, like you did with Brothers. Like that's quite a unique design space, and they're doing it in a really strong way. Their design is really quite good. So I don't know. That game did well. It didn't cost as much as other things. You got a friend pass with it, so other people could download it and play with you online. That was like $40-$50, but then it really quickly came to Game Pass. So I don't know. I don't know what the limiting factor there is. Like games like Sifu and Kena, right? These are both games that had promotion during PlayStation States of Play, or even their PlayStation showcases for their next generation content. Those are indie games with like a little bit of marketing. They're not published by PlayStation. They've just got a little bit of support, like to show on a big stage. And those games did fairly well. I would say Stray is in that camp, except that it also released on PlayStation Plus Extra day and date. So that's kind of irrelevant for the example.
Yeah.
Those games did relatively well. I think Sifu did well enough, and Kena did too. It kind of needs to. I feel like a AA game has to have that quality though. It has to be like sort of pushing at the edge of what a AA quality game is, and almost be masquerading as a AAA quality game of a smaller scope, rather than something akin to Biomutant, which I would say is a AA game in terms of production. But the amount of money you had to pay to buy it, to play it, for the content that you got wasn't necessarily great, because that game's scope was huge, and it was made by a core team of like 24 developers or something like that.
Yeah. Yes. And it's funny as well, because THQ Nordic has this, like, they have less money and less pull in the industry than a Ubisoft and an EA, but they're the same type of company. Structurally, they are they're playing the same game, right? They are development. They are a publisher that have internal developers, as well as developers that they don't own, which they will publish their games for and have like a working relationship with.
They're also in the business of embracing and acquiring other developers as they come.
Yes. Which is like, it's this weird, like, I want to say that Embracer for the past couple of years have been trying to like eat up a big part of this AA space. A lot of the larger companies like Microsoft and Sony, they've been looking at the studios that they've been working with, and Microsoft has also been looking at the biggest studios in the world. Like, what can we buy? Like, we're going to buy Bethesda, we're going to go out and buy Activision Blizzard. They are maybe not so concerned with the what's a good example, like the Gearbox, right? What is ostensibly a very large AA studio. In terms of...
Yeah, they have been acquired recently.
Well, that's what I mean, right? Like, I don't think that Microsoft were looking at a Gearbox because they were looking at the company that owns Gearbox, right? They were looking at Bethesda to then buy Arcane.
Yes. They weren't looking at buying the team that made Elder Scrolls. They were looking at buying ZeniMax.
Yeah. And I think that's because they had bought all of their AA studios that they were friends with, right? They bought
Ninja Theory.
Ninja Theory is a great one. The people that made
Double Fine.
Ori and the Blind Forest, those folks over there, like they
Moon Studios.
Sure. But then you look at the games Embracer are going to bring out, and a lot of them you kind of look at and go like, I kind of wish I could just have a monthly service that is cheaper than buying a brand new game, spend maybe more money overall on them, but I don't have to think about copying $80 or $70 on a game that I am not quite sure on. I would rather spend $10 10 times over a year on a game I'm not sure on.
Yeah, that also lets me play Halo Infinite and Crackdown 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of our little final subheadings we've got here is, are there games that you have played on Game Pass that you wouldn't have otherwise played? And I think the answer for both of us is a definitive yes.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, like games like 12 Minutes, I only played because of Game Pass. Halo Infinite, I probably would have bought. Forza Horizon 5, the big ones, definitely. But in terms of AA's, it's interesting. I look at something the subscription model has introduced is the, as I said before, it lowers the barrier to entry, but then it introduces another problem, a problem that subscription TV services have been having for nearly a decade now, which is decision paralysis.
Decision paralysis and time debt.
Yeah, exactly. Where you spend half an hour scrolling through every game on Game Pass, and then you're like, fuck, I don't know.
Yeah.
Gears of War or Superliminal or Tetris Effect, or what should I play? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do that so often.
Yeah, a lot of the ones that I have played that were pretty classified as AA were things like Slime Rancher. I think is a good example. Honestly, weirdly enough, the Disney Dreamlight Valley game could possibly be considered a AA game. It is made by Gameloft, who are a quite a large studio, but the team working on Dreamlight is not going to be. It's probably not going to be over 100 people. Judging by the scope of the game and understanding the studio, like which specific team on Gameloft is working on it, which is the French one, I believe, or the Canadian one, I don't quite remember. But also, like the thing we said before about like, hey, it's sort of around this price point, and it's got these like, things that they need to hit, metrics and key performance indicators that this game might have, but they can still do something kind of neat with it. They're working off the Animal Crossing formula to make their own version of it and changing some stuff up and experimenting with some things here. That's probably the most recent AA game I can think of that I might not necessarily have played elsewhere.
Or if you had to buy it.
I'm only playing it on my Xbox because it's on my Xbox. It's on Game Pass. If it was a game that I could purchase on PlayStation, which it is, I wouldn't do it because it would cost me money outright, and I'd rather just continue paying the service I'm already paying for and playing it via that, which is so odd.
And there's games that we will, like, as a group, is like, oh, this multiplayer game's come out. Let's, if we don't all have it, let's re-up our subscriptions for the month, and then we'll try out Grounded, which we did when that first released, and then we didn't like it, and so we stopped playing that. And I'm looking through my list here of games that we've played. Astroneer is a game that we didn't buy, but we Game Passed for. Human Fall Flat. Other things here. Deep Rock Galactic. 12 Minutes, I already said before. Exo 1 was an interesting one earlier this year. Tetris Effect for me. Tunic. There are some good ones there that I definitely wouldn't have played, but a lot of those games that I've mentioned, I don't love. The games that I know that I'm really interested in playing, I probably am going to buy on a different system because I prefer to play on other systems. Or they're sort of larger experiences that are coming out on Game Pass. Forza Horizon 5, I have enjoyed being able to play that through Game Pass. It's not a AA game. It's very AAA. It's a very high budget game.
Yeah.
Same with Naraka Blade Point. That's NetEase's Battle Royale. Saints Row is an interesting one.
It
Came out
is.
earlier this year.
I haven't been able to stop thinking about it through this entire conversation, but I haven't been able to work it out because it is definitely larger than a AA game, but it was, I feel like maybe it's just...
It's like quality level.
Yeah, like the quality of the game is just not quite AA. Sorry, not quite AAA, and it's...
Yeah.
But it's a franchise that used to be definitely a AAA franchise, but also it being a THQ Nordic joint now at this point has sort of brought it down a peg, and I think because their quality level overall... Quality levels, maybe. I mean, their
execution.
Yeah, I guess it always feels kind of funny. There's always just something a little bit different about it. Maybe to what the studio used to be, and I think because you can look at that studio as a whole and go, you are this publisher in name only at this point. You are just a company that bought a bunch of stuff and then changed your name to the IP that you bought. But it's still odd.
It is odd, yeah. It's the most in-between game I've seen in a long time.
Yeah,
because it's releasing at a AAA game price. It's got the funding of a AAA game and
the marketing
behind it.
Yeah, the marketing AAA game, definitely.
But yeah, the execution on it, the way it felt to play, it was like, this doesn't feel premium in the way that I would expect and hope for had I paid for it.
Not unlike Biomutant.
Biomutant is also another interesting one. That one feels like a AA game, no matter which way you slice it.
Yeah.
It's just that somehow it had the marketing and the appeal enough that they could sell it at a high enough price. And the scope of the game, I think, took it there as well. That they were like, you can create your own mutant creature thing with our robust character creator, and the different size of your limbs will make you stronger or faster or something. And it's like, yeah, that's a pretty surface level stats thing, and you can breeze past that pretty quickly. And it's like, the things to do weren't that great. The combat wasn't that great.
Yeah.
The narrator being the only voice actor in the game was really strange. But it was a frugal move to do, right? They couldn't voice all of these other gremlin-y things, so they had British guy wake up in the morning and go, the Bimple Bomps from the before time used to use this to send ping pongs from their dish radars. That game was AA in everything but name.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mentioned Saints Row before as a AA game or a AAA game. It's important to remember it's not on Game Pass.
Yes.
I think it will be within the near future, but it is not currently.
But a lot of the play on games, I feel like they haven't really been coming to Game Pass.
Yeah, not immediately. Stuff like Kingdoms of Amalur: Re-Reckoning made it to PlayStation Plus pretty quickly.
I suppose Chorus is on there.
Yeah, Chorus. It's the kind of thing they won't go there immediately. They won't release day and date there, which makes sense. They don't own that service. If they release every game there, they're eating into their sales a lot, especially because they're in that weird in-betweeny kind of thing. No one's saying, I can't wait to play the next game from Koch Media.
No matter how many times they decide to have an E3 press conference.
Yeah.
God, I hope they do another one. I hope they do another one. I cannot wait. I was
disappointed and relieved that Gearbox didn't do one this year. It was like, I don't have to see Randy Pitchford.
I was so sad. I wanted that so badly. I wanted him to just be a nuisance on set once again. Ugh.
Yeah. So, Jeremy.
Kerry.
We're at the end of the topic.
Do we have an answer?
I ask the headline question, the top line question again to round us off. Do AA games only have a space to release now on Game Pass or PlayStation Plus?
I think the answer is no, but I think the answer is no as long as you are being published by the Embracer Group or higher.
Yeah, as long as you're being published or promoted by a big company.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
it's the kind of thing, you have to be a quality AA game to break through the noise. You can't just be filler. You can't be a stocking stuffer.
Yeah.
You will not make it if you do that. Especially at a AA budget rather than an indie budget, you will be spending far too much money, and it will be very risky on whether you will be seeing any of that come back to you if you're not providing at a quality high enough to gain interest from the audience when they see it and interest from publishers to help you release it.
Yes, yeah, like some breakthrough titles, for example, Disco Elysium, right? Like,
Yep.
certainly a larger than indie game, but still definitely not a AAA game. But
It was published by Humble Bundle, right? That's who helped them publish it.
I think it was also published by what's the publisher, like Zaum?
Zaum.
Yeah, like I don't know how to. I don't know if that's a word or an acronym.
I imagine it's an acronym. Independent game developer and publisher. So, yeah, but they developed Disco Elysium.
Okay, it was developed by them as well. Okay, so I guess that is an indie game?
I would say this is indie.
Yeah, right, okay. I think I just assumed that it was larger than maybe what it was. Maybe when they got their re-release is when it became more of a AA thing.
It's got 57,000 reviews on Steam.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, look, the Divinity Original Sin series, Kingdom Come Deliverance, like those games, like Platinum games, the Platinum games, they are the ones that can break through. They're with Square a lot of the time, right? Like they're with the big publishers. That you need to be with a big publisher, I think, to not have to release on Game Pass if you're a AA game, is my opinion.
Yeah, it's too risky otherwise. It's far too risky to be putting in more than an indie team's worth of like effort and money and resources, paying that many people. If you do not have some sort of guarantee that there's going to be an audience for it at the other end, it's
a lot.
And it just didn't used to be that way. It just used to be that you could, if you were on the shelf next to FIFA and you weren't a sports game, but you were something else, and you had like a kid wizard on the front, and they're like, oh, that looks cute, grab, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, the time of the PS2 and the Wii era is long gone. There were times where we didn't see any AA games. We didn't have AA games for a while. Like I said, after the GFC, a bunch of those studios collapsed. But we only had indies, we had big games, and that was kind of it. Yeah. Until I want to say like 5 years ago.
Well, I don't know. Like that's a timeline that is hard for me to just say, yep, you're right, or no, you're wrong too.
Yeah, I might be incorrect. Yeah. Well, that was fun. That was very nebulous, and it really pulled from a lot of different threads that are quite like
AA is nebulous,
pertinent. AA is nebulous, but it's interesting thinking about like acquisitions and streaming services. It's quite a relevant topic for the day and age that we live in. We're gonna go for a break, everybody. Feel free to hang out and chat if you're here with us live. We'll be